So what a cool combination of names. I don't know where the parents came up with Tyler, but it just doesn't go with Wogenstahl. But we have Tyler Wogenstahl with us today. You have all sorts of titles, responsibilities. You just mentioned before we came on, it's like, man, I just put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and it felt really good. You have all these roles and jobs. I'm assuming you don't get to do that very often.
No, I don't. Trying to figure out how to stay connected when you need to connect and disconnect is definitely a challenge, and it's something I'm trying to get better at.
How in the heck at 38 years old are you trying to get better at that?
Well, I think when you start companies and you have people who work for you, you try to coach them in ways that they're going to do a good job at work, but also have meaningful and fulfilling personal lives. And when you're trying to coach people to say, hey, I think this is a good way to do it, and then you have somebody in your office say, but you never take a day off, you start thinking to yourself, you're like, well, how do we do this? How do we get better at that?
Yeah.
And I think now with, it's kind of funny. It doesn't matter if it's your iPhone or Do Not Disturb or an Apple Watch. On days that I don't have as much going on, I kind of manage those things a little bit differently. From, what type of watch do you wear that doesn't vibrate your wrist to how do I figure out to make sure that I set a notification that allows me to give people the time and attention they deserve. And I think that's one thing that probably a lot of people have a hard time with right now is how do I just focus on what I'm doing in the moment as opposed to worrying about what's going on with a phone call, a text message, an email, whatever that may be, right?
I think it's a battle. We know it's not probably good for our health. It's probably not good for our stress. It's not good for blood pressure. But it's really tough when you have things happening that are important, that so many people are relying on you. It's tough to make that decision to know, like, hey, I need to intentionally shut this off, either to be in this moment now or to give myself some space, because for highly competitive people, which usually people that start businesses and entrepreneurs are, that are really driven to do a really good stinking job at whatever the heck they need to do, it's tough to have this willingness to shut it off. Like, have you gotten better at that?
No, I haven't. I think I haven't figured out how to master that piece of it yet. And I think we all get conditioned and trained on how to do things. And when I first started off in the hospitality business and I was running maybe one location or multiple locations, one of my jobs was to be responsive and to get back to people and answer those questions, right? And it was something that I actually had owners of companies, kind of yell at me about. They're like, hey, you have to make sure you're answering your phone and you're responding to people, in a reasonable time frame. So as I, kind of climbed the ladder and, went from a GM to a multi-unit person to a director to a vice president, it was my job to be responsive. And I was actually in a meeting, a boardroom meeting with an owner of a company, a big company, and he was going through asking everybody, how do they stay organized? How do they get so much done? And he ended up coming to me and he was saying, hey, Tyler, your region's always doing really well. You have a good retention rate. What's your secret? I said, well, I just really manage everything based on my calendar and my email. And, when people send me a response, a question, whatever it may be, I make sure that, I use that to kind of guide my day and knock out these tasks. And he said, well, that's really unfortunate. And I, was kind of thrown off by it. And he said, you allow other people to dictate how you're going to spend your day and your time. And that kind of resonated with me. And it's resonated with me for a couple of years. And as I have multiple projects going on now, I think you try to figure out the best way to spend your time and how to appropriately address certain things, to where there's things that you want to do and things you have to do. And I kind of, right now, I really enjoy creating things and trying to figure out ways to, better the lives of our teams and, how do we make our businesses grow. But then there's still times that you have to go back there and do the fun stuff, the bookkeeping and the accounting and legal and HR. So there's a balance there. And I think it's getting the balance. I think that's full circle, the
Right.
conversation from the the phones, the alerts, to your emails. It's how do we achieve that good balance?
Do you think it's because that's a term that always comes to my mind too, balance. Do you think it's needing to find a balance, or do you just have to find a way to just interweave everything into all of our days? Like, what do you think it is? Like, it's not even any pushback around it because the term was always balance in my mind. But I'm like, guys, I can't find balance, like a true balance of. So I have to find a way to make it all work because, I'm heading to the Outer Banks tomorrow morning and spending the week. It's the same week every year and stuff, but the stuff's going with me. There'll be time for some books, but it's not vacation the way a lot of people want vacation to be. And so I have to find a way to weave it into everything on vacation. So I don't know. I mean, do you think balance is it, or is it we got to find a way to make all these things happen and accomplish them all?
I think ultimately we are responsible for our commitments. So what we take on, we have to find a way to get that done. And rather that's learning to be, get comfortable being uncomfortable, or figuring out a way to provide or to create better automations, better systems, have the right people in place who can kind of handle these things as well. I think as organizations grow and your workload grows, essentially you have to have people who can do the things you need to get done, and you have to trust in those people. And I think that takes time. I think that's bottom line. It takes time to build an organization and build people around you that you're going to trust to say, you know what, this person's got it. They're going to get it done. And I think there's a certain, from my standpoint, from somebody who was heavily in operations to where now, I own, a couple different businesses, you have to give people a little bit of rope, but not too much to where they're going to sink. So it's a balancing act.
And you figure out through that process, like, who's got it, right?
You do.
Yep. Because if you go back to our learning curves, we weren't perfect all the time, but probably people found out with us, like, how much could they handle? Right. And you were able to knock it out. And they're like, let's give them a little more. We didn't know those were happening for managers, but those things were happening.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And, it's funny because when I was with this large company a couple years ago, and they own casinos and mixed use entertainment districts. And I just taken over a major district that I actually really didn't even want. It was in Kansas City, and I was supposed to go to DC, but they sent me down here, and I was going to take one director's district, and he was actually going to take a promotion to be a vice president. And him and we really didn't see eye to eye, right? And I remember him and I were having kind of a challenging conversation, and he wanted me to do things more like him, and I was very adamant that I didn't do things the way he does. So fast forward about 5 years, I have my own company, and I'm having a conversation with one of my managers, and he told me, he said, "Hey, I'm not you. I'm not going to do things like you." And at the time, I was a little wound up, and
because you're like, no, you're going to. That's how you felt. You're going to.
You're going to, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to get it done. But then you take a step back and you think about that, and you say, okay, wow, full circle again. So I don't think everybody needs to do things the way we would, and I don't think we want them to. With me, I want to bring people in who are going to bring, positive, fresh ideas, and I think it's my job as somebody leading an organization to try to help them in that learning curve and how to get them to where they need to be faster without making, mistakes that we know they're going to make. I used to have the analogy of saying, hey, I'm going to tell you that there's a pothole ahead, slow down. You're going to hit that. And that's kind of what we try to do now. You coach them.
So how's that happen? So you find yourself in a bunch of roles here. So there's, there's always somebody on our podcast. We bring people on, you either wrote a book or you have something significant going on. And I'm sitting here thinking like the things you're sharing about you being the promoter of this huge event coming to Westchester, Ohio. It's a northern suburb of Cincinnati. So it's the Voices of America Country Music Festival.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, so and you're the promoter of that.
Yes.
What leads you to this place? Because that sounds like a really big job.
It is. So
how's this happen?
So I ended up opening up a live music venue in Westchester called Lori's Roadhouse with a couple of partners, and it did pretty well. And it was a venue that was kind of geared around that Nashville style experience. And as businesses do, they evolve. And one thing that we said we were going to do with Lori's Roadhouse was we were going to have part of the focus being on Nashville entertainment from Broadway, kind of make it that Broadway experience. And then we were also going to have some big concerts. And of course, I said, well, maybe we'll have like a couple concerts a year. And then we ended up having like 35. So that idea that we had for Lori's Roadhouse to be a Broadway style venue really completely transformed, and it ended up being a country, or I would say an indoor country music concert venue, and it did really well. And I kind of looked at that and I thought to myself, it would be great to do something bigger on a larger scale. And I, kind of just thought about it and kind of put it away and kind of said, hey, I wish I would have built a bigger venue. I read an article in, I want to say Cincinnati.com, maybe 2 years ago, last year, 2 years ago. And it was talking about the best music festivals within Cincinnati that you can drive to within 4 hours. And I was like, where's the one in Cincinnati? Right. So, and growing up here, I knew everyone, they like to be active. They like to go out. They like to have fun. They like to go to, do all kinds of stuff. So I figured it was something that the market would want. Right. And also in Cincinnati, we're surrounded by other markets, whether it's Columbus, Indianapolis, Louisville, that, I've actually lived in almost all those markets and I think they're great. But to me, I find Cincinnati home and that's what I've, identified with. But you get the rest of the United States, sometimes they're like, well, Cincinnati is just kind of little brother of Columbus, or why would you live in Cincinnati when you have Louisville? Where I'm saying like, no, like I live in Cincinnati. So making that decision to do a music festival in Cincinnati was something that, we thought a lot about and I thought we could be successful with. And then kind of the second part is everyone tells you like, no, don't do that. Like you don't want to do a music festival.
That's what I'm sitting here thinking. Having my business mind from the businesses that I run, I instantly go like, man, what financial number are you responsible for? You don't have to share it here, but I'm like, whatever it is, that's a big financial number and commitment to put this together. And you hope you're good enough to sell the tickets.
That's right. It's definitely a big number. And what you do, I think you're more along the lines of you're almost building a community to do an event like that than just doing an event, right? So, and the reason why I say that is you have to have the support of the township. You have to have the county support. You have to have state support. So once you do that and you have, everyone's agreement that they want to allow you to do something big on that scale, then you have to sell it to the artist, right? Because everyone says they want to do something. And then, it's put your money where your mouth is, right? So you have to convince these agencies in Nashville that, we are responsible enough to have Dan and Shay. We're responsible enough to have Old Dominion. And then from that point, we got to pay for them and we got to put our deposits down. And then we have to create a package that the community and the consumers are going to understand, right?
Does that all come from this place where you said, you looking at all the music venues or the festivals within 4 hours on Cincinnati.com, is that you like, hey, I think we want this? Does it all come from that? Like, this is marketable and this is something people are really going to buy into. And then it goes.
So I used to, when I was with another hospitality group, I had some bars, some restaurants, and then I was also one of the directors of some large events. And then I ended up directing a music festival. And it was always something I said, you know what? I would love to just do the festival business. And I said, maybe one day I'll just own music festivals and I won't have to worry about dealing with bars and restaurants. And then I started my own group and I still deal with bars and restaurants and I did a music festival too. So,
why does that happen? Is it kind of like, well, it just goes together? Why does that happen?
Well, I think we do things how we're taught, right? And I was taught to do music festivals by using shared resources and having the other businesses support. So for me, I came from organizations that had big teams. And I think, I enjoy that aspect of it. I enjoy that collaborative aspect. And when you start doing something, you say, hey, you want to do it, make a little bit of money and you're good. And then you start building and you have other people and you say, you know what? I have a great culinary director. He's amazing. I need to find something for this guy to do. Right. And so you start putting your aces in places. And I think the flip side to that, again, then something else happens where you have people you're responsible for. And then you say, oh, shit, now I need to really make this work. And I think that was a pivotal moment for me where I was really responsible for your team. because you know that they all have lives, they have homes, they have families, they have cars, maybe they just have a Saturday night out, but you're responsible for those people. And that's where, we talked about the coaching and the guidance comes into play where, I look at it as a zero failure, an option, right? We have to make this work. And that's kind of how all that stuff comes about.
Is it, how stressful, because I'm even thinking about this when I heard you were going to come on and Dave set it up for us. And I said, yeah, man, that sounds like a cool event. As a consumer, I was like, yep, I think that hits. That location, that area. Now, who knows what the ticket price are going to be, but, we have to deal with that, right? You're like, yeah. But that seems like, I'm like, yep, that should be a home run. So then you just have to execute.
We're to that point. We've had a really good introduction to the market. Ticket sales have been good. And there's also two sides of me now. It's funny. There's the side of me that is, if I was strictly an operator and I was working for another company, I would say like, hey, we're doing awesome, high five. Then there is the personal side of Tyler that is, the owner of the company who's saying, ooh, like, I want it to be better. You're super concerned, which I think that's good. I think you should wake up at night or in the morning and have a little bit of fear in your belly to make sure you ensure something gets done. But so far, the initial reaction from everybody's been very positive. We've seen good ticket sales, and we've seen ticket sales from 24 different states, which I think is really cool. Yes, I still worry about ticket sales, and I think Cincinnati is going to be somewhat of a last-minute market for buyers. But I also think because of some of the things that's happened over the last couple of years, all festivals and all events are a little bit slower to buy without a fear of a sellout. Unless you're a Morgan Wallen or a Taylor Swift, people are saying, hey, why do I want to give one of these promoters my money for a year if there's a chance that it may rain or they're going to cancel the show or there was a pandemic where they didn't do it for a couple of years. And also right now there's a lot of things going on with the economy with interest rates or whatnot. So if somebody puts, a $200 ticket on their credit card and they have a 22% interest rate, that's going to cost them double. So I try to think about all those different things when we put together an event. And from there, you talk about execution. So I say, hey, first and foremost, how do we explain the event? Right. So we try to do that through marketing and through our branding. That's very important to me. And then we try to figure out how do we make the ticket buying experience good for the consumer.
Wow, that seems like that's been really tough recently. I'm not anywhere near an expert, but I hear all the things going on with this dynamic pricing, and it's people are trying to get early in line and they can't get tickets, and then afterwards they skyrocket to 10 times the amount. I'm like, man, that has to be, I don't know who's responsible or fault or what's, that has to be really tough. This ticket sale piece has to be really tough. Maybe it's not.
It is. I think, again, there's always a plan in place, right? There's a plan and there's a strategy. And, I'm not going to comment too much on the way some of the big ticket companies do, whether it's Live Nation or Ticketmaster. But, kind of they have a formula for the way they do things, and it works for them. But the way we look at, ticketing is it should be as stress-free and fun as possible, right? So you go on there, you get the information, and you have to decide, hey, what package do you want? What suits you best? And then also we wanted to add that extra step of saying, we'll allow a payment plan. So it didn't break the bank to go ahead and get that in and lock it in. So giving people a lot of ways to buy conveniently, because I think everybody wants those conveniences now. The other piece of ticketing is, people have to figure out what package best suits them, right? And I think year one, no one knows what that's going to look like. So it's our job year one in execution to show people like, hey, how fun this is. So that way we have more of a demand in year two.
Is that an intent behind, is this a long-term plan of a music festival?
So I kind of have a joke, and this is something I told investors and agencies and everything else. I said, year one was to get to year two. That's all it is. That's all it's about. Now, as I say that, I kind of laugh because, man, year one's a lot of work just to get to year two. But that's kind of where my mind's at right now.
What taught you that you needed to say that?
I don't think I've came up with anything myself. I think I've been fortunate to work for some good people, some bad people, and some people that were just trying to make it. And you take all that experience and then you have to mold your own opinion. And I think that's a great lesson for consumers as well when they look at a ticketing site to say, hey, you don't have to take our word for it. You can look at the ticketing site, you can look at reviews, you can watch news articles, and then, take all that information and make your own opinion.
Is it like talking about your ticketing site, like for a festival like yours, do they go to your site? Is that what, or, okay, that's how that works. And so these packages, this is a weekend festival.
Yes.
Right. So I'm a guy, unfortunately, I work too much and don't have enough fun. My significant other, she'd say that too. All right. But something like this, I'm sure that it's like a 3-day deal. Maybe it's 4. I'm sure it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
So we did 4 days.
Oh.
And that's a funny story. I think everything's like, a funny story or pivotal moment, right? Oh. And it started out to do a 2-day festival. And then we were kind of looking at availabilities and whatnot. And I said, let's do 3. And I remember I was so adamant about not doing a 4-day festival. And then something ended up happening with artist availability, and we had an option. And we said, okay, let's do a bonus night. And then it turned into 4. In saying that, like, those are some really difficult festivals to execute.
Yeah.
So we definitely went big on the first one.
Mm-hmm. What's your anticipation on how many people attend this thing over these 4 days?
I would really like to see that 25,000 people one of the days in total attendees. And I think we're going to get around that 100,000 over the weekend between Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The other piece of it is, like you mentioned, that you may not be able to go for 4 days. Totally understandable. That's why we offered single day ticket options as well.
For like the band you're targeting or the act you're targeting. Like, let me go see them.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. Because I think there's something to that people just don't have time to take off. And when I look at festivals, I think there's 3 different kinds. There's the music festivals that are on a beach that we say, hey, we're going to pack our bags and we're going to go to Tortuga. There's the music festivals that you want to go to camping, right? You're going to say, hey, we're going to go out in the middle of nowhere and do this, and that's where we're going to be. And then there's the, more metropolitan inner city staycation festivals. And that's what we wanted this to be. Now, I'm super happy that we have people coming in from out of market because I think Cincinnati has a lot to offer.
Absolutely.
And I think the bigger picture with me is, yes, the music festival is in Westchester. I identify it as a greater Cincinnati event. Mm-hmm. And I think Cincinnati as a whole, as a region, gets stronger once there's more solidarity between Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Northern Cincinnati, and even probably all the way to Dayton.
Yeah.
Strengthening that Cincinnati corridor.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know where the 2.2 million cutoff is, but it's a 2.2 million MSA, right, in Cincy. Does that pull in that Middletown stuff? Does it pull any of the Dayton stuff, or does it cut off there? Do you know those demographics?
I think it stops right around, I think, Springboro, maybe.
Okay.
Right.
So it does go up to Dayton, or okay.
And from my understanding, the way they kind of planning, urban planning way back in the day, they kind of planned that Cincinnati-Dayton corridor as one connecting piece.
Yep.
And then, things happen and, that you do different developments. But I think it makes a whole lot of sense if you've ever been to Texas and you go to...
I was getting ready to say that, man, between Waco and San Antonio and Austin. Mm-hmm. I was just down there 2 years ago. Those cities are coming together, but you're talking about Dallas and Fort Worth.
Right.
How it's coming together. It feels like they call it the Metroplex, but it's one city. But when I was driving down the highway to go from Fort Worth and went to Waco, and then there's a couple cities between Waco and Austin that are really big now that nobody even hears if you're not from that area. And then San Antonio, I'm like, guys, these things are coming together. And everybody's like, yeah, in 10 years, man, they're going to be that. That's wild to see how it comes together. So the planning is, it makes sense. If there's 2.2 million people we have here, Tyler, you got to be able to pull 25,000 a night.
That's what we thought.
Right? You got to be able to.
That's what we think. And again, I like to remain humble with it.
Yeah.
And I tell my team that we're going to work as hard as we can, and we're going to ensure that we've crossed every T and dot every I until that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That way we don't have to look back and say, I wish I would have done something different. But also, to your point about Greater Cincinnati, what I've told our marketing teams and just everybody involved is that we had to nail this as a Cincinnati Music Festival. We had to nail this market first. If we didn't appeal to the Cincinnati market, we weren't going to be able to grow. We weren't going to be able to attract other markets. And that's also why some of the partners that we have in the music festival, and I say partners, some of the brands that are getting involved are great brands like the Cincinnati Reds, La Rosa's Pizza, Gold Star. So there's some really cool brands that are Cincinnati based that everybody sees every day that to me, I think are important to make sure they were included in this event.
Yeah, I mean, is that what you found in all the businesses in promotion, that if you don't connect and hit it local, you're not going to make it? Like, is that a strong statement, or have you seen something happen other than that where it works?
No, I think that's a phenomenal, correct statement. And the reason why I say that is even when I look at the restaurant business, I think the best brands are the ones where people identify with that brand and they say, hey, I want to take you to this place that's local. I want to take you to this restaurant. It's really cool. It's in Oakley. It's called J. Alexander's. And I'm like, that's not local. But what they did as a brand, they made people feel that that was their local restaurant. And I think now with the way hospitality is, I think people, they want that. They want to go to those places that are homegrown and that feel unique. Right?
What is that about us? Because I every once in a while I find myself doing that. Like I'll put a post on social media. I recently was looking for someone who had a CNC machine who could fabricate some wooden letters for me. And I found myself, and I don't do this often, I'm like, man, am I like becoming one of them? But I said, does anybody know a local woodworking expert or a local business who could crush this?
I think we're all tribal.
Yeah, is that what it is?
I think we are. And I think there's, when you do business, and again, this is something that I've learned over the years. When I was younger, I would set up, business relationships with a branding firm in New York, and I was living in the Carolinas. And then I have an owner come and smack me in the back of the head and say, hey, we need to do this business local. And I'm like, well, okay. And I think there's some things you can, go out of town with. And I think there's other things that if there is local influence, it's going to help do that. So I do. I think it's just people they want to deal with people that they have a relationship with, for one. But then also, maybe have the same vision or understand that vision, have similar values, and understand what you're both talking about.
Culture seems to be local too. Some things you can identify with, right?
I agree. And I also think there's a flip side to that where you want to continue to bring in new, fresh ideas as well. Mm-hmm. That's something that I think Cincinnati, is continuing to embrace. And I think, I'm going to say it, I think we still need to get better at. Mm-hmm. I think we need to keep on bringing in new things and trying new things. So, you are more of a diverse market.
Yeah. What do you think? Look what we've done with just like FC Cincinnati and the soccer team. That's crazy. This city, the Cincinnati Reds were the first Major League Baseball team. We're homers. There's a great college basketball, all these sports. And soccer really, I go back to high school. I'm 44. When I go back to high school, soccer just really started to become a thing there where I really saw it happening 25 years ago. And all of a sudden there's the MLS, and now they announced that Messi's coming to Miami. It's like, wow, like the best soccer player in the world, even though he's in the back end of his career, he turned down sounds to believe somewhere between 400 million and $1 billion to go to Saudi Arabia to say, I'm going to come. So it's neat to see like, wow, that can happen. And that's happened here in the last 5 to 10 years. So I think you're right? That's a different, and I go there. I wasn't a soccer player, but I went there and experienced. I'm like, they hit this experience. Mm-hmm. I went there and I was like, they hit it. So what's going to make a great music festival? What's going to make yours, the Voices of America Country Music Festival? What's going to make that great?
It's the customer experience. It's providing a unique experience to that attendee. And we wanted to make sure that there was a lot of different ways to get there. 1, convenience of the event. 2, the entertainment. 3, going there, being able to experience different food vendors and activations. And I think 4, the ability to make it unique to what they were doing. Whether that's a weekend with friends, something where they wanted to take their parents to see a legacy artist like Alabama, or if it's something where, hey, you want to go solo and it's in your backyard and you just want to get out there and interact with the community. I think we wanted to make sure we had all those things available. And also, too, with this event, there's a couple of things that I think forget to get mentioned sometimes. 1, the historic nature of the event. To be able to say, hey, we're doing, this first year music festival at the National Broadcasting Museum site. And I can tell you, I use the word ignorant because it was in my backyard forever growing up, and I never knew anything about this national landmark. And I went there and I met with the museum curator, and he started giving me the history of the museum. And it was amazing because it was one of the first Well, it was the first broadcasting station for the Voice of America, right around the end of World War II, that was a strong enough radio station to broadcast all through Eastern Europe. So I thought that was a really cool piece of history. And also, when you start learning about Crosby and Crosby Radio and how he created stations that would broadcast a strong enough signal for consumers to have an affordable radio in their homes to get information, to get messaging, I'm like, that's really, really cool. And I think that's a piece of history that Cincinnati should really embrace. So that's number one. Number two is the different charities that we're working with for this event. And I kind of had a clarity moment as we were doing this event where I knew the museum was one charity we were going to work with. And we were going to work with Parachute, another charity which dealt with making sure children that needed representation had it within the legal system. Great charity. And there were some news articles that came out about the festival, and it was talking about, for-profit entities and whatnot. And I kind of scratched my head and I said, I know we're doing a lot with charities, but what other charities we're actually working with? And to my surprise, and it was actually a really nice moment, I started talking to my marketing teams and they said, well, we're talking to Make-A-Wish. And we got with Make-A-Wish, and we're actually going to be doing 4 wishes, well, 1 wish a day for Make-A-Wish. So I thought that was really cool. We're going to have the Humane Society on site. We're doing something with the Ken Anderson Alliance to where a portion of the ticket sales is going to be donated to Ken Anderson's alliance and towards autism. So these are all things to me that, hey, that's why we want to work hard, right? We do want to give back. And I think you add all those things to an event, it really makes a great community event.
Is this something, with you saying being in your backyard? Do you have any of these moments? Maybe you're like, this is just the next step in this, what I do. Do you have any of these moments like, man, am I really doing this?
I think I have the moments where it doesn't feel like I'm doing it. That's what I suffer from. And I get very task oriented and operations based. And I was talking about this to some of my partners and investors the other day, that instead of communicating the plan and where I think we're going to end up, I'm very focused on saying, hey, we have to solve this problem, and then the next problem, and the next problem, and then we're going to have an end result. Where some people, they probably look at things and they're saying like, wow, we have this great thing coming up, and they're so excited, and they're there and they're feeling it and they're living it. Whereas I'm looking at it as, I really have to pick a stage today. I have to determine what our lighting package is going to be like for this festival. I need to make sure that we have enough crowd managers for the event. What's our volunteer program look like? So those are all the processes that I'm going through right now.
Yeah, I think probably to execute these things really well, there's someone that's in a significant position that doesn't get to appreciate it in the moment.
Right.
You just can't, right?
Right.
You're so focused on the process, you can't be worried about the outcome, because you're like, if I take care of all these processes, the outcome will be what it needs to be. So probably even in the moment, the stress of when the event is happening, you're making sure constantly, probably on microphones, you're on everything, making sure that executes well. You'll get to the end, be completely exhausted, and have like a moment of reflection while we pulled it off, and it's like on to the next one.
Oh, it is. And the way you do that is a big team. Yeah. A big team, a qualified team, and you really do have to compartmentalize that stuff. And it's funny where you mentioned when do things sink in and when you have a chance to enjoy yourself. Somebody we're doing production with, a really good friend of mine out of Nashville, his name's Daniel Schlosinger. He's one of the owners of Glow Motion. And we have some really cool lighting in our venues. And Daniel, when we started doing the festival, was like, hey, I want to make sure that I connect you with some really world-class people to help with the event. And I'm saying, well, you guys are like the best of the best. I think we're too small for you guys. And he introduced me to somebody named John Featherstone. And John's one of the best lighting designers in the world, in my opinion. And he's from England. And he got on the phone with me. And I was like, John, I think you're too good for us. And he's like, no, Tyler, it's going to be great. So we started working with some of these guys. So through this process of meeting new people, Daniel said, hey, I want to connect you with Troy from the Station Foundation. And that is a charity that is, I believe it's a West Point based charity. And it's for special forces, soldiers, veterans, and families to give them some support, right? In a lot of different ways. And I had to learn what that really meant. And sometimes charities, the cause isn't always easily explained. So I started talking to Daniel and Troy, and they said, "Hey, would you donate some music festival passes to this charity?" And I said, "Of course." And they said, "Do you want to come down to Virginia?" I was actually last weekend to go to this horse farm where they're going to do this charity concert. And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, we'll go out there." So I fly out to DC, drive to Virginia, and I go to this beautiful horse farm owned by Gail Dady. And she used to be with the State Department. She owns a capital investment firm. And Gail and Barb and David Rowe kind of help support this foundation. And they're just great people. So I get out there to their home, and the first thing they do is they thank me. And I'm like, well, what did I do? Right? I showed up to your home, like, thank you for inviting me, but we donated something for a cause. And the other thing we did was they raised money from the silent auction, like $10,000 that went towards this charity from these tickets. And I got to sit back and talk to some people that actually benefit from those proceeds, and how, the Station Foundation helps them. And, they actually gave me a hug and different things. And those are the times where it feels like you're doing something. And I got to sit back and, shut the phone off. And I was on somebody's back porch listening to live music. And that was cool.
All that came from a contact that you had from a guy at a company called Glow Motion.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
That's right.
How'd you meet that guy?
So I met him.
No, sorry, not that guy. That's not Featherstone. Is that Featherstone?
No, that's Daniel Slauson.
Okay.
So I met Daniel maybe 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Nashville, and I was a area manager, and we had a nightclub there, and it was on Music Row. And Daniel owned a small live music venue, and we were young guys. I say kids, and we kind of partied together. And when we kind of follow each other's endeavors on social media or whatnot, and you stay in touch. And he started doing lighting for the Super Bowl, and he was
kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal, right? And he created the wristbands that light up, that the Super Bowl, so everybody's wristbands light up. And I, we were kind of friends, and stayed in touch or whatnot. And I was doing this live music venue in Westchester, and I was trying to figure out, the best sound system, the best lighting, and all that. And someone who works for me mentioned, he goes, "Why don't you call Daniel?" And I was like, I don't want to bother him with a small music venue. Like, he does the Super Bowl, right?
Like, how's this connect with what we're doing? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I didn't want to bother him. And he said, "Hey man, how you doing?" He goes, "Well, we have this company that designs custom lighting. We'd like to do your install." And I was like, "Hey, I don't know how we figure this out. And it's, we don't have a big budget." He's like, "Oh, we'll figure out the payments." And, he came up and installed our lighting system, and it was amazing. And, I'll never forget that. And just a great guy. And then, hey, I decided I'm going to open up another restaurant in Cincinnati, and it's a sushi restaurant. We think it's pretty cool. Just opened. It's called Baru. And I was opening Baru right around the time LRH was about a year old, and I was about right in the process of the music festival going on sale. So it was pretty wild. And then I was trying to be creative enough to design a sushi / cocktail lounge in the 8451 building. And again, I went to Daniel and I said, "Hey, I think we're going to put a few lights in this venue." And he's like, "Hey, I got it. You just have to let me do what I want and be creative." And I said, "Okay." So he had this winch system for lights to where the lights actually go up and down. And he goes, "It's never been in a restaurant in the United States." And I said, "Well, we can look at it." And he goes, "I'll just bring some up." So he brought up like 75 lights. So we ended up installing that into Baru, and now we have kinetic lighting that changes colors and goes up and down. And it's one of the craziest light shows I've actually ever seen, and it's in a restaurant.
And it's become a thing, I bet. I hope the sushi's good. I'm sure it is. But people are probably talking about the lighting.
Right. And I think that's something that's kind of unique about our group. And, from the festival side or the hospitality side or the culinary side, I always laugh and say we're not restaurant people, but then maybe we're not festival people either. And we put our own spin on things. And sometimes that's challenging for the team.
Yeah, because there's that bleeding edge stuff.
It is. And, so they go, "Hey, how do we do this?" And, you have the culinary team who's making great great food, and then we have this crazy light show above them, right? And I think it all boils down to one thing: the experience, the guest experience, right? And I think if the guests go to one of our restaurants, go to our concert, go to a festival, and they have a good experience, we're going to be okay.
So I'm hearing about all these ventures, and whatever it is to be in Tyler's mind, it's nonstop. So what makes you continue to press yourself to do these new things? Because this is exhausting for so many people, and it's a lot of pressure. And I can just tell you're like, well, this is kind of what I do. But what makes you keep going? Where's that passion and this purpose come from?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I woke up this morning and I was making some coffee, and I was like, I'm going to be on a podcast. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. So I kind of think about it, and I go, well, maybe you talk about some of the tough moments, right? Because everybody always says, you're so calm. You make it look so easy. And I think about the times where we had just opened LRH. You know, I knew I was doing the music festival, and the broker that I was working with wanted to show me a space that 3CDC had downtown. It was Bar Room. And I looked at the space. It was an 8451 building. I really liked it. And I was like, I don't know what to do with it. And I met with the folks at 3CDC. We kind of hit it off. And they said, we'd like you to do this concept, because they knew we had some background in fine dining. And I said, all right, I think we can knock it out of the park. So we were going to sign a lease. You know, we had an LOI, we work out all the details. And I woke up that morning that I had to sign the lease, and I was in a panic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I doing? Right? Like, we're about to sign another restaurant. And I remember that was a super stressful day, because I was really concerned on, could we do it? How do we get this done? And now, you know, you fast forward, and people like it. And I think from my standpoint, where you say, hey, what keeps me going with it is, I think there's a certain degree of feedback from the guests and our teams where they say, we really enjoy this. And then that sinks into me, and I say, really? You like it? You enjoy going here? You like the food? You had fun? And they're like, yeah, we had fun. You look at your reviews or whatnot. So when you get that positive feedback that you built something special, those little moments give me enough currency and enough energy to say, okay, I'm going to do the next one. It's those little things that you hold on to. And it's funny where they come from, right? It can be somebody, you know, a compliment from a stranger, or, you know, somebody telling you how one of your businesses may have affected their lives. And those are the things that give me the fuel to do other stuff.
So I'm going to make an assumption here. You're not a guy that does well with the accolades and the props. Like, people are like, hey, man, great job. You don't need that.
No.
I'm not saying it doesn't feel good, but you don't need it. And it doesn't feel comfortable for you always, does it?
It doesn't, no.
Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know exactly. It's I think it's something you start to get used to. I kind of believe in being humble, right? And
it's a good belief.
I think when you...
What's that even mean, though?
To be humble? Well...
Because if you know you're good, like, what, you can't talk about it? You got to put that away?
I think there's... If you look at my background, and I learned this the hard way. So I kind of consider myself a worker. Even now, you know, when people say, hey, you own this company or whatever it is, it doesn't always feel like it, because I'm working, you know, and I work with my people. And then sometimes I have to actually let myself know, like, hey, you know, you're freaking your people out because you're the owner of the company.
You're the leader, dude.
And you're working with them.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, they seem really nervous right now.
They need you to lead them sometimes.
They need you to lead them. Right, exactly. And, you know, it's like that saying, you know, sometimes you can't work on the business when you're working in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's that side of things. So
you try to remain humble.
You try to remain humble, and you want to lead. You know, like I said, I've worked for some good people, some bad people. So during that process of working for people, I think there's a transition that entrepreneurs make, or people that make that next step of, you have to go from being somebody who's dependable, and I would say dependable is one, and to where it's,
maybe you have some discipline, maybe you care about doing a good job. That's a good employee.
Right, consistent.
Yeah.
You're consistent, right? Dependable and consistent. Next thing you know, to really take that next step, you have to be somebody who's going to innovate, make some changes, push the envelope, and make some money. Here's the problem with innovating within a company. You got to break that third wall, right? You got to fly close to the sun. You got to make some shit happen. Bottom line. So then as an operator, you come to that T in the road, right? Do you go down the safe path or do you take a chance? Well, when you work for other people, taking a chance, I have to tell myself, am I going to get fired if this doesn't work? Right? And so if you're smart and you do well and you did your homework, you make a calculated risk and then you make something happen. Well, that's good, right? That's good. And then everybody's happy with it. And then everybody's like, wow, Tyler's smart. He's getting it done, right? And then I'm in an organization. Everybody says, how smart you are. Well, next thing you know, people are going, well, he just thinks he's too smart. And then you have an owner of a company saying, these are my ideas. These aren't your ideas. And then you get a little bit too much shine. So during that process, I tried to make myself a good leader and somebody who I'm saying, hey, it's not about me. It's about the team, right? And I think as you transition, you get to a certain point where you have some owners who are going to embrace that talent and say, hey, we have talented people who work for us who's going to do things. Or you get to the point where you're going to come to that point where you either need to do your own thing or paint by the numbers. And I got to the point where I wanted to do my own thing.
What level of safe is deciding you want to do your own thing? Of like a 0 to 10?
I think it's, if I had to say 10 was safe and 0 was doing your own thing, I think the risk level is a 1.
Yeah. So why do it?
I like the challenge. I do. And I think that's something that I've figured out during my career when I was working for other people and taking other jobs. I hit a certain point where I was pretty successful and I was achieving my goals, right? And the company was happy with me. And I had some other groups offer me some bigger roles, some titles. And I said, well, that sounds challenging. I want to try that. And I did that and I achieved those things and I didn't have any more fulfillment. And that was kind of a weird feeling. I actually felt worse, right? Because I was saying I wasn't really happy what I was doing. I didn't believe in the product I was selling, but I made money and I achieved those goals. And then you kind of reflect on that. So now when I do things, it's, you got to do what you love, right? You have to be passionate about doing it. And I think that's why, I do still work hard and I get out of bed and do it. And I think that's what makes the risk worth it.
So you mentioned a couple times, anytime I hear someone say the same thing twice in different contexts, I'm like, I'm going to go there. So you mentioned twice you've had good managers and some bad managers. I think we all have. But for some reason, we tend to learn a lot from the bad managers. And every once in a while, there's that mentor, the good one, that we really look up to that really made an impact. But it seems to be like there's one of those. There might be 2, but it seems like there's 3 or 4 bad managers. So who have you learned more from?
I would say it's definitely a combination because there's people that I look up to or I looked up to them at the time. And now I look back on things and I say, you know what? Maybe I held them in too high regard. But also at the time I looked at them as they knew it all, right? They're the best. And there's also people that I look at and I had challenges with that I look back now and I'd say, I understand why they did those things. And there's even things I do now where I say, man, I made the same decision they would have made in that situation. And I think there's, with people being people, they're going to make mistakes.
We all do.
We all make mistakes. And I think there's a challenge with separating your personal identity from your professional persona. And some of the people that I looked at as they did some amazing things in business, maybe their personal life was a little rocky. Mm-hmm. So you have to say, okay, I want to take the good from this experience or what I learned from these folks, and you have to leave the bad. And I think there's also there's a certain degree of transition and where things change and develop, where this could have been good behavior 10 years ago and acceptable or a good way to manage. whether it's throw a plate against the wall and yell, where that may not be the right way to do it now. So you have to take all those things and make them relative to now.
Yeah, because you touched on being humble, and as I'm listening to you talk about it, and I'm like, okay, I know what's going through his mind right now. Aren't you also processing? We don't need to go there and talk about the moments, but aren't you also processing the moments that I could have done that better?
Every day.
As you're sitting there talking about it too, though, and we're evaluating those people that weren't the best managers in our lives, and then you're like, well, I've had some of those moments.
Every day.
Right?
Every day. I think about the people who managed me, right? Man, I would have been really
and how
hard
tough
to
that was.
Man, I would have been hard to manage because I had my own ideas. I didn't listen. Like that was just I listened. And I think one thing too, you fix on a couple people that you're going to listen to. And I think organizations have layers, right? And I've been the type of person I look at, whether it's the owner of the company or a director or whatever, and I identify with that person, I'm going to listen to that person. But there can be a layer in between that I'm just not going to listen to that person. I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, I really gave that person a hard time,
I look at all these moments. It's a challenge all the time because I try to look at who that 30-year-old Mark was personally and that 32-year-old. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to learn here and I'm really going to help hold myself to a high standard, then it's like, hey, man, in these moments, take a step back. Now, we have these things we have to accomplish being, if we're a for-profit entity, if you're a nonprofit, there's things we're responsible for. If you're running a business, if the buck stops with you, you have to accomplish things. So, but it's like, hey, who would the Tyler have wanted me to be then? Like, why is there something that could have been done? Like, even though Tyler didn't want to listen to anybody, who would he have listened to? And what would that person have looked and sounded like? It's like, that's the moments that we can have these big growth moments. I don't think we're going to hit a home run with everyone, but if we really try to be humble and say, hey, we're on a level playing field with everyone, I think there's some big things that can come from that through this reflection, through a calmness. Listen, if somebody's just being an asshole and they're just not willing to do the work and do a good job, listen, that can't stand. But I don't know, maybe we can be better for the Marks and Tylers now. I think that's probably what a good manager is. Right?
That's right.
Trying to plug into everyone and, hey, I can't change our goals and the things we're trying to accomplish here. I can't change them for you individually, but like, I don't know, let me try to hear you a little more.
That's right.
Let me get a little buy-in here. What do I need to make you feel for me that makes you want to do this with me better?
Right.
Right.
Well, I think it's establishing a relationship with your team, right? And then culturing an environment where they're going to speak up, where they're going to give you an idea. And that's the goal, right? That's where we're really producing. And, just there's small examples I can think about the last couple of weeks where I talked to my marketing and design team and I said, hey, I want you guys to come up with a festival map. It's drawn out, start labeling it and putting signs together. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, yeah, you do. You do. Go ahead, take that chance, right? And we want people to think and to stay within the guidelines and the boundaries. But I also think from an organizational standpoint, this is kind of that boring corporate stuff, we have to have clear expectations, right? And we have to have those guidelines. And then we lead from those expectations. And then I think they're either going to live up to those expectations or they're not. But through common language, they're going to understand how we need to get things done.
How have you found it that you could identify a Tyler? Or, like, I've got some anarchists inside of me, right? I'm like, oh, that's the system. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to lay down these corporate boundaries on people. What do you do to try to recognize that person pushing those boundaries? Like, there's talent there. Because they can make us feel like, hey, would you just do what you're supposed to do? Hey, can you just stay within the boundaries? I think I'm flexible enough. And then that person that wants to break through, how do you identify them? And how does somebody who's responsible for so much, running a company, such a big event, how do you allow that to grow?
I think it goes back to our time, right? Being able to give your team enough one-on-one FaceTime to understand that person, get to know that person, but also get them comfortable enough to be who they are around you. And I think that just, it sounds funny to say it takes time, but it does. And then if you're monitoring that organization right, if you're being that good traffic controller, you're going to see that change. you're going to see that talent rise to the top. And then you have to, from my standpoint, that's where I want to develop that talent and protect that talent.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's people we put time in, and there's nothing more disappointing to me than when we have talent and we didn't give that talent the time and attention they needed. And,
they leave.
We lose them.
Yep.
And there was somebody who actually, one of my CPA, we were talking about, there's a quadrant. And the funny thing is, it was really like meaningful to me, but I didn't take in all the information of this. But basically it said, hey, there's 4 different areas that we want to focus on, right? And that's basically, you have the things you have to do, the things you want to do, and the fires that you have to put out. And then there's innovation and growing the business. And most of the time we should be spending 60% growing the business, and the other things get broken down in a different percentage. But we're spending so much time fighting fires, right? And I think a lot of organizations suffer from this is we give a lot of time to the folks who are troubled and who are underperforming because we're trying to coach and get them better and we're following up. And then some of the people who are doing a great job, we're not recognizing that.
Because they're getting the job done.
Because they're getting the job done, right? So it's develop our good talent. And, if it is a fire that keeps on reoccurring and a problem, like you said,
let the damn thing burn.
We got to burn it. We got to pick that weed out.
Yeah, man.
And those are things that I think even from when you start a new business, one thing I've noticed, I operate differently because it's mine. I have a different level of anxiety. I had a slower reaction process, right? Before I was one of those directors or VPs who said, hey, hire slow, fire fast. Now I hang on to people and I say, hey, let's try to work with them. Let's talk to them. Do they fully understand, right? I was having a conversation with my culinary director on the way over here, and he was kind of telling me a challenge story about an employee. And I was like, do they understand? And he's like, Tyler, they're drinking after work. I'm like, I guess they understand. So it's
but maybe they don't.
Maybe they don't, right? Maybe we need to have that conversation.
Maybe their brain doesn't trigger to think this is a problem.
Right. And I think you have to have the hard conversations.
Yeah.
And when you have those hard conversations, the anxiety goes away.
Yeah, man.
Right. And my father actually said something to me the other day, and he goes, people don't know what's in your head. You have to tell them. Right. And we sit there and we look at people and I'm like, why don't they get it? And then you think about it, you're like, well, did I have that conversation with them? And to me, that's what it's all about. It's you really do have to lead. You have to lead. You have to give them that clear direction.
Mm-hmm. What are you most excited about? Like the event here coming in August, it's the big thing on your plate right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say you don't have the restaurant and all this stuff happening at Lori's Roadhouse, but it's the big thing, right?
It is. Really excited about it. If I can see something come together in my mind, I know we can accomplish it. And if I can figure it out, we can accomplish it. Or I think we can accomplish it. Anyway, that was me being arrogant. So, but when I went out to the site the other day, I can see the entire site in my mind, how it lays out. And that gives me confidence. The other thing that's really cool about it is, again, all the different activations and partners that are involved. And we've narrowed down who we're using for production, who we're using for sound and lighting, who our security company is. We have great life safety plans. So I feel like the event, it's going to run well. Now, of course, there's that old saying, everybody's got a plan until they get punched. Mm-hmm. So I always try to schedule or structure our businesses to where we have room to pivot. If we have no room to pivot, we're going to fall down, right? So I try to make it to where we have enough room to manage the unexpected. So that's exciting. And, with the event, I want to sell a lot of tickets. I want people to have a good time. I want to have good feedback. And, you want people to have fun. And I think that's what it's all about.
You're a guy who feeds off that. You can take a step back and be like, these people are having a great time.
I'm 100%. Yeah. And I don't get to eat in my restaurants a lot. I don't get to be a guest a lot. A lot of times, if it's a show, I'm standing backstage. And the best part of it is when you can kind of, shut the mic off and just look back and lean against the wall and smile and say, look at this. Look at what we've accomplished. I was at one of our music venues, and we had a really big show. We had Bailey Zimmerman, and it was a crazy show. It was right after the guy took off. and we had over 2,000 people in the venue. And I was actually standing backstage with somebody who owns a professional sports team. And they were like, look at this. Like, you have to be like the happiest guy in the world. And I'm looking at the person who owns the professional sports team. I'm like, you own a professional sports team. Like,
You see 30,000 people.
you do this every day. But I think everything's relative. And
Yeah.
I think when you get people that do those types of things, I think hearing the roar of a crowd, there's nothing like it, putting that together. And it's a big team to get that done. So, one thing I thought about the other day was, what are our values to making a good event? And I told my team this, and I said, I think the only way we're going to execute this event at a high level is figuring out how we're going to execute the Voices of America Country Music Fest, not how we're going to mimic Tortuga, not how we make this kind of like Ultra. We need to make it our music festival. So I said, what's our number one goal? To have a unique, memorable experience for the attendees. And then I said, how do we get there?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we wanted, an easy experience for the consumer. We want to make sure that they feel that they receive the value that for the
couple $100 they're going to spend or something.
Yeah, that they get value out of it, right? We want to make sure it's a community event where everyone is invited. No one's left out. That's very important to me with what I do. And the last piece of it is that they have fun. And I looked at that and I said, so if we do all these things, how can we not be successful? And I think that that's good to lay that out for your team so everyone understands that. And the other thing, I try to think ahead with stuff, and to have values that everyone understands and everyone buys into. I told my team, who was doing the volunteer and the staffing piece, I said, I want to make sure that every person who works a concession, a gate, anything, understands these values and signs off on it. So that way we get to walk up to that person working a customer service station, ticketing, sanitation, and we can be like, hey, we want you to have fun. We want you to enjoy what you're doing as well. And I think that's important.
When you're walking around at that event, I'm assuming you'll be there all 4 days.
I think so.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Do you wear one of those lanyards that says, like, I'm the guy?
I don't. I have to wear a lanyard so they don't arrest me.
Because the security isn't, and they're not all going to know who you are.
They don't know who you are. Right, exactly.
But it doesn't say, like, I'm the guy?
No, I don't think, again, I don't need that. The way I look at this event, and it's funny, it kind of resonates with me. If it's successful, it's because of what the team did. If it fails, it's kind of my fault.
Oh, everybody will definitely say that.
Oh, 100%. So that's how I look at things, and that's how I approach it. And I also think you're always going to make decisions when you're the decision maker that are unpopular. But I try to look at things and say, hey, how do I come about my decision process? And I try to make it on 3 core values. What's good for the organization? What's good for the guest? What's good for our team? And if we can't line up, then, we're not going to do it.
Not going to work.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
When you guys face challenges from now through, when is this? August what? What's the?
August 10th through the 13th.
Okay. So all the challenges that you will face in the problem solving between now and the 13th. There's so many. I just know from running businesses, and from doing this, you're going to deal with. What's your process when these problems arise that, I don't know, maybe you planned for them, maybe you didn't, but that's a new one. What's your process?
You have to compartmentalize. Not just myself, but you have to have different compartments in this event that handle volunteers, that handle concessions, that handle our food vendors, that handle our partners and our sponsors, that handle production, that handle artist hospitality. Because then the way I look at it is, if we have a problem with artist hospitality, I can flex our resources from concessions to support that department that needs help. And that's what it's about. It really is. I mean, that team mentality, that's how you get things done.
Seems simple.
It seems simple, but it's follow-up.
Yeah.
It's clear communication, and it's that way everybody understands what your goals are. And in my experience, if we have people who are working on something that they're passionate about, that they believe in, they're going to do a good job. They're going to do a good job. And even if they don't execute at the highest level, their efforts a lot of times makes up for that. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's people just, they fail, right? But in my experience, if somebody is passionate about it, they care about what they're doing, they believe in it, they're going to do a good job.
So the production team will put this stuff up, but where do we go and buy? Someone who wants to look at the event. What's the website?
So it's voicesofamerica.com. No,
is it
Voices of America countrymusicfest.com.
And I'm sure it's all over social media.
It's all over social media. The website, I think, is very informative. Okay. We're getting ready to release a festival map, which is really cool.
That's cool.
So everybody can kind of see the scope and the scale of it. There will be an app. We're actually mailing out the wristbands right to your home. So you slap on that wristband and you don't have to worry about waiting in line. You just get scanned in. We have a cashless option as well. So you can put your credit card on that wristband. And then if you want to buy a beer or a Pepsi or a burger or whatever it is, you just scan your wristband. We also wanted to make sure that we had options for people to bring cash or a credit card. And there's parking options available. So we made sure there was parking right on site. We're working on a couple pickup and drop off locations to where people want to go to a more public place and ride a bus up there. They can do that.
Wow. And
then also, I hope that a lot of people use rideshare apps. I hope that people wear out Uber and Lyft that weekend.
Mm-hmm. Well, is that a concern of yours? I mean, if let's say this ends up being just a home run, weather's great, a lot of last minute attendees, let's go up here and do this thing. Like, is it a big concern? Is parking, our cars? I mean, is that a real legit? Could congestion be a thing?
I think you're going to see an increase in traffic in that area. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Mm-hmm. But we are on 75. Mm-hmm. And I look at this event, there was one factor in how I figured this place was going to be successful. On the front side of the park, there's a Chick-fil-A in Westchester. On the back side of the park in Liberty, there's a Chick-fil-A. I was like, when do you ever see so close together?
Mm-hmm. And handling traffic and the volume and
right. I mean, we have Westchester, we have the Tylersville, Voices of America Shopping Center in front of us, and then behind us we have Liberty, mm-hmm. and that development up there with Cheesecake Factory and Cabela's and all that good stuff. So there's hotels around, there's great highways, great roads. We're not going to break 75.
Yeah.
And also, I have to give a lot of props to the Westchester Police Department and the fire department, because those guys have been great. They've been rock stars. And, first and foremost, we need to have a safe event. And they've challenged my organization to come up with a great life safety plan, right? For what we need to do to make sure it's a safe event. And the thing I've enjoyed about this process is we've all been able to work together to come up with a plan that's going to work. And, they've done just a really great job, because there's a lot that goes into it, from what the police has to do to what the fire department has to do to ensure that it's a safe event, and in
EMS, all that stuff.
Right. In the case of an emergency, that everybody's going to be safe and going to be good. And, I don't know where we're going to end up with ticket sales, but I can say with confidence that it's going to be a safe event.
There you go. So if 25,000 people show up one night, it's going to be a safe event.
We're good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How many acts are at this 4-day event? A lot. For me, I would say a lot, whatever the I
think it's 34.
How's that feel to you, 34 acts?
It feels good. Again, I think we start doing things in our mind and we say, hey, what's a music festival supposed to have? And we draw this out, and that's what we have. The hardest thing one thing that's difficult about a music festival is booking the talent, because no one wants to do a first-year music festival. And you really have to sell the festival, the organization, and, I had to sell myself to the agencies. So we booked our first artist, and that was Alabama. And I was like, we're good.
Seems like a win to me.
This was last May.
Yeah.
And I booked Alabama. I said, we're good.
Everybody's going to come now.
Everybody's going to come, and, everybody's going to jump on. And then they didn't. And then we have a rejection for an offer, and a rejection, and a rejection. So then I said, okay, let's figure out how to put together a good lineup. And the next artist we booked was Dan and Shay.
Pretty good win.
I was stoked.
Yeah,
right?
pretty good win.
I was like, we're good.
Now everybody's going to sign up.
And we had an artist drop out. And I was like, shoot, now we got to get that Saturday artist. And I was freaking out. And I talked to a couple different agencies. And early on in the process, I talked to one agency and I said, what would I have to do to book Old Dominion? And they said, I don't know, grow up, be a 4-year festival. Okay. So I kind of took that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I guess I won't do that. And we had some offers in for Saturday Artist, and I got a call from the agent for Old Dominion, and he said, hey, where's my offer?
You're like, I'm not a 4-year event.
Yeah. And I said, I didn't think. He's like, Tyler, I didn't say that. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, they have an opening.
Fair enough. So, he was flying to Dubai, and the agent, great guy. We do a ton of business with him now. But so I start making calls to some of the guys that I use to help us make our offers and whatnot. And I said, hey, we have to get an offer in for Old Dominion. And then we ended up getting that lineup. And so we had Alabama. So we had Alabama, Old Dominion, and Dan and Shay. And I was talking to some of my partners. And they were like, well, Tyler, this is different than the initial lineup we had offers on. I said, yeah, but I think we're going to be good. And they were like, well, we don't know. And of course, everybody's unsure. So I go down to AIBA, and it's a buying conference in Nashville where all the agents and managers are down there, and a lot of people would buy. So I'm talking to all the different agents, and everybody kind of knows about VOA at this point, and they know what we've done and the work we put in. And basically, I would submit an offer, and the agency would tell me they didn't like our marketing plan, or we weren't good enough, or they didn't like the field and we needed a grass sample. So we go back and we do things. And so now we got some good acts, right? And now we're trying to fill our other acts. And we're making decisions on what's our budget and what type of artists do we have. And I said, it was important to me that we did everything right from start to finish and that we had a really solid lineup. So then I kind of went crazy. And I said, let's make sure we have strong number twos. And we booked Riley Green. We booked Gabby Barrett, Dee Messina, Jake Owen. We added him to the lineup. I was really excited. And I put an offer in on Lainey Wilson. We got Lainey too. Chris Young, we booked that weekend. And I just started kind of filling the pieces in. And then people started talking to us a little bit more about the festival. And we had a lineup. And I wasn't sure how good it was. I felt good about it. But again,
somebody told you it was great.
Somebody told me it was great. And that was CMT. So CMT calls us and they say, hey, we want to work with you guys and showcase you as a hot the hot new music festival of 2023. And I'm like, the VOA festival? Or did you mean to call? So I was like, this is cool. So they're going to be on site. I forget about that sometimes, but so they will be on site. The CMT Hot 20 team, and
so they're already doing some press around it. They probably will on the month coming up and everything.
Yeah, they're doing.
That's awesome.
We're up and running.
Yeah.
So during this process, there's the CMA Awards and the ACM Awards, and a couple things happened. Well, Old Dominion won Group of the Year. Lainey Wilson has won everything.
Yep.
Alabama, there was something unfortunate that happened with Alabama. Where one of the members died the day we put tickets on sale. And so that was a challenge. And we were like, man, that's terrible. What do we do? And I watched the music community, the country music community, really, put Alabama on a pedestal.
Wrap their arms around them, yeah.
And they did. And, I saw Alabama, Old Dominion, Lainey Wilson, Dan and Shay, Jake Owen, Megan Maroney, all these artists that we have on our music festival were dominating the award shows. And so then I'm kind of sending out a few text messages like, I think we're good. Like, what do you guys think about this? And so that was really cool. And now, the CMA Fest is going on in Nashville. And I look at all the artists performing. The headliners are Dan and Shay, Old Dominion, Lainey Wilson, and there's more. But we have that lineup. And that feels good. I think we put together a really, really good card.
You know what that feels probably good for? The second and third and fourth tier acts.
It does.
Right? It has to.
It does.
Yeah. Like if I would think like if Joe Rogan was going to be on the stage, anybody who gets to be on the stage with him that night, or these really top tier comedians, you're like, yeah, that's a huge win because the people they're going to pull that I'm going to be exposed to, it's probably really good for those people.
It is.
I'm assuming. I don't know anything about the business, but I'm assuming.
It is. And the way you book a music festival is you start with your headliners.
Yep.
and then you go down,
Mm-hmm.
and then you fill all those slots. And the one thing I told the agencies was I didn't want it to be a top heavy music festival. I wanted people to be able to come and enjoy from start to finish.
Yep.
And the one thing I really like that we did as well is country used to be kind of dominated by male artists. We really have a balanced lineup with some really great female artists. Lainey Wilson, Gabby Barrett, we have Dee Messina, Megan Maroney. Like, I said that name again because she was an artist that I met her manager in Nashville, and she said, you have to book Megan Maroney. She's going to blow up. And we had the conversations. I said, let's do it. Let's put an offer in. And sure enough, right? Like, she's a, top 10 country artist right now on the charts for, some of her singles. So that's really cool to be able to meet some of these up and coming artists, have them in our venues, have them at the music festival.
Yeah, man. What, year 2 and year 3?
That's right.
Yeah, man.
And, we already have offers in on year 2 artists.
That's awesome.
Right now. And
that's awesome.
It's, that's funny, right? Like when you're talking about how do you execute an event, and then you're doubling down on year 2.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I told, my team and investors and partners is it's going to work.
Yeah.
We're going to do a good job.
Yep.
And now that we've done what we've done up to this point, next thing we're going to do is book year 2.
All right. I'm excited to hear it. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe even a grumpy guy like me at times maybe finds a way to get up there and hear an act or two.
Well, I hope so.
Because I know the significant other, she'd love it. So I think, I'm excited about it, man. I'm excited just about to talk to you, to hear about locally, because I think there is really awesome things happening in this region. We talked about at the beginning of the podcast in Cincinnati, the new things that are coming, but I don't want everybody to know about it like they know about Austin, Texas now, because I don't want to change too much, but it's really cool being from here and seeing what's happening. And then organically, you're a guy that's from here, and all of a sudden you put this country music festival together here and the energy they're pulling together. So I'm pumped. I hope that it ends up being, for you guys and for the effort you're putting, I hope it ends up being like a huge win. Because I think for you to feel like it's a huge win, it gives you that much more motivation for things in the future. And who knows what it does for your creativity, for your motivation, for your passion. So, and you're a Cincinnati guy. You're all in. The restaurants, the business, Lori's Roadhouse. Just you're an all-in dude for this area.
I am. And I agree. I believe in Cincinnati. I believe the area is going to grow. We have another restaurant opening first quarter of next year. That's going to be in the former Macy's location in the Foundry. It's called Vintage. It's going to be
Is that next to Ruby's?
It's next to Five Iron.
Okay.
And it's on the corner across from Mita's.
Yep.
And it has those really cool round windows.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember growing up in Cincinnati, walking past Macy's. And, to think that we're going to put a venue in there was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the same thing that I think about a music festival is I'm like, wow, we have an obligation not to mess this up.
Yeah.
We have an obligation to the city to make sure that this is a concept that everybody can be proud of.
I was just downtown this morning, and I was like, it feels like the energy's back. I don't spend as much time down there, but I really felt that. I was driving on 4th Street at about 8:15, and I was like, this is good. There's a lot of construction happening. I said, man, this is really good. I hadn't felt that, the past 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully from you guys, from the restaurateur perspective and stuff too, you're like, hey, man, not only are we coming back, like maybe this is like a launching pad. Maybe coming out of this moment when we couldn't go to restaurants as much, and it was probably a struggle to survive, like maybe this is giving us a new opportunity to do things different in a new fun way. I don't know, but it felt good this morning.
I agree. And I think one thing that I hope everybody does in terms of, growth within this market is let's invest in our young people and those lifestyle amenities that people crave. Right. I think that's really important because if you look at some of the other cities where, people graduate college and they want to move to, whether it's in Nashville or Charlotte, they have really cool lifestyle amenities. And I think that's what we need to continue to do in this market is, make it appealing to young people to where we have, affordable housing, we have apartments that people can rent, we keep jobs, and then also let's keep doing things for people to have fun.
Yeah. When new things are happening, when there's energy, you don't really have to talk about all the fun and all that stuff, that energy feeds growth, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like when I was downtown this morning, I'm like, this feels good. All it takes is, I'm not going to go down there and make any big investments right now. I have a ton of stuff going on. But all it takes is a few of the right people to drive through a downtown and be like, wow, some out-of-town developer, someone from here, be like, hey, you know what? I got a couple $1,000,000. I'll invest it down here. Let me do this. And enough people feel that way. There's neat things that can happen. So you guys obviously feel good about these investments.
We do. I
Right?
think the new convention center district that
Yep.
3CDC is helping put together is great.
Is that whole 4th and 5th Street corridor? That whole...
It is. I think that's from Fountain Square all the way to the convention center.
Yeah.
And there's some really great operators over there, from Jeff Ruby's to the Thunderdome Group to Jose Salazar. I think Five Iron's a great addition. And, hopefully my group, Further Concepts, is able to, establish ourselves as, a Cincinnati brand and a Cincinnati staple that everybody has that trust to frequent.
Awesome. So what's the second half of 2023 after this venue and the event? Is there a deep breath, or is it, or what are you doing? Are you pressing for the third and fourth quarter? What's happening? What's it look like for you guys?
I want to execute at a high level. That's what I want to do. We created a lot. Now it's the time that we stabilize and we execute at a high level, and we show people that we're not a one and done group, not flash in the pan concept. So, after the music festival, we're definitely going to have tickets on sale for year 2, and we want to grow that brand and make that a staple. Lori's Roadhouse is an indoor concert venue, so we want to make sure that we're going to be going into the busy season on that. Baru is going to be going into the fall, which is great. That's a really cool sushi restaurant that the team does a phenomenal job at. And then Vintage is going to be under construction. From that standpoint, I have one other thing that I'm looking at doing, one other event that I'm not going to release yet, but it's kind of in the process of planning. But I would really like to stabilize what we have and make them rock solid the rest of 2023. And then 2024, that's a lot of the businesses are approaching that second and third year, right? And to me, that's going to be a pivotal year for us in growth and just doing what we say we're going to do.
Your moment to thrive, man.
Right. And
yep. You got the setup happening right now, right?
It is. It's a setup. And I said last year, I was having a beer with a couple of the guys that, work with me. I said, this year is going to be hard. And I said that last year. I was like, this year's really going to be hard. And there's times, that we reflect on that. And I say, this year's hard. This year's hard. And you just have to put your head down sometimes and be aware of what's coming at you. And, know this too shall pass and understand what you're working towards. And for us, we're working towards 2024, 2025.
Thanks for coming in, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope the event's great. Restaurants sound awesome. And there's a lot of people out here that are like, man, let me go be a Tyler. So I don't know if you'd be Tyler all over again, this person you've created, but it seems like you're doing some cool shit, man.
Well, I appreciate it. And hopefully, again, we can, whether we're inspiring people to get out and be social, or if it's just somebody wants to get in a career of hospitality, I think those are all, meaningful conclusions to us.
Awesome, man. All right. Thanks for coming in.
All right.
All right, man. Yep.